So we are going to move to another country. We are moving to Australia, and Roger Stancliffe will talk to us about retirement from mainstream employment. Roger, you're muted. You're still muted. Let's see. Nick, is there something we can do on our end?
The only thing I can do is to ask to unmute, and there may be a button that Roger can see.
Yep.
Okay.
Here we go.
Okay.
Now can you hear me?
Yep.
Good. Well, hello everyone. My name's Roger Stancliffe. I'm speaking to you from Sydney, Australia on Thursday afternoon. So greetings to people in other time zones. I'll be talking about retirement. So in most of the focus, naturally enough, when we're talking about the dignity of work, is about getting a job and keeping a job and having a satisfying work life. But like the rest of society, after a satisfying work life, people also are entitled to a satisfying and socially inclusive retirement. So I'm going to be talking about aspects of that. I'll be focusing on mainstream employment. That's people who work in regular jobs with, and we're talking mostly about people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And the retirement research for that group has mostly focused on sheltered employment, what's referred to in the United States and labelled in some of my slides as facility-based employment. That means people working together in a building, in a facility that is mainly or exclusively for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And it was interesting to see the slides of the different age groups of people with disabilities working in Japan. And I'm going to be starting by just giving you a bit of an overall context of retirement. And although I'll be focusing mainly on mainstream employment or community-based employment, I will also talk briefly about sheltered employment, just to give a broader context. So this is some work we did a few years ago using US data from the National Core Indicators Survey, which is an annual national survey, in this case involving 39 US states. And this shows cross-sectional data, so a snapshot in that particular year of the percentage of people in each of these age groups who were following the black line involved in community jobs, in mainstream jobs. And as you can see, like the charts we just saw for Japan, there is a quite significant reduction in the percentage in older age groups. Now, of course, this can be interpreted in two ways because this is a snapshot. It's not following the same people over their career, but it's just looking at different groups, different age groups. So the people in the 65 years or the 55-year group are people who left school 30 or 40 years ago when circumstances and employment was very different, and community jobs were much less available to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So the drop-off in the different age groups could be partly due to their different life experience over those years, but it also could be partly due to a greater tendency to retire younger in people who work in community employment. When we compare that with the sheltered employment, as shown by the orange line, you'll see there that the percentage of people in older age groups who work in sheltered employment continues to be relatively high in the oldest age groups, including 65 years and older, which is an interesting question in itself. But the trajectory in the older age groups is quite different from those in community employment. So one issue that is of interest is whether people in community employment tend to retire earlier in their careers than those in sheltered employment, and to investigate some of the reasons why. Also in this chart, you see the grey line at the top of the chart shows the percentage of people who are in facility-based day program services. In other words, unpaid activities in segregated and congregate environments. And clearly with the rates over 50% of all people in the 65 plus age group, clearly in the United States, that is the dominant model of activity for people in older age groups with intellectual and developmental disability who use disability services. And I should emphasize the heading on this page is about retirement meaning withdrawal from paid work. So we define retirement in that way. So that means that because of that definition, we only talk about leaving paid work, not people retiring from unpaid activities such as day programs. So I'm now going to move on to a study we did more recently in the United States with Linda Anderson and Sarah Hall. This was a much smaller. The data you've just seen represents thousands of people across the country. This was a small qualitative study in Minnesota in the United States, but it does show some interesting trends that are similar to what I just showed you. And we were able to compare people working in mainstream community jobs and those working in sheltered employment. The chart you can see is the 7 people who worked in mainstream jobs, and you can see that the red dotted line shows that their average age at retirement was 57, but there was a very wide range of ages, retirement ages, some as young as 43, some as old as 65. So one of the implications for that is that preparation for and planning for retirement needs to start early, because some people retire at a quite young age. And research in the regular community shows that people who plan and prepare for retirement have a better retirement from those who retire suddenly, often involuntarily, with no plans. So of those 7 people in regular jobs, only 1 in retirement was attending a disability day program. And interestingly, that was the only person amongst those 7 who lived in a group home. By contrast, the 3 people who had worked before retirement in sheltered employment all attended a disability day program, but their retirement age was older, over 63 on average, and from late 50s as old as 70. And the range of retirement ages was smaller. So I think those are some interesting factors, and particularly interesting that there was all of the people from sheltered employment ended up in disability day programs. And importantly, for the 3 people who were in sheltered employment, they literally remained in retirement in the same building where they had previously worked, but going to a different room to attend an unpaid day activity rather than be paid to work in the sheltered employment. So, that suggests to us that for people in segregated environments like sheltered employment, the disability service life track is the default option, and people, unless plans and efforts are made to change this, will very likely end up in a congregate environment in retirement with other people with intellectual and developmental disability. So I'm now going to turn to some of the reasons why people make decisions about retirement and some of the comments they made about these issues. And there are 3 groups of those issues. One is factors that cause people to delay retirement or want to return to work after they've tried retirement. So one is just the meaning of work, that people derive satisfaction, identity, achievement through their work. And one of the participants said these words: "I'm a man, I want to work. And this is part of my identity." Of course, we all are paid to work. As I said, the definition of retirement is discontinuing paid work. And some people in retirement found that they had less money and they would like to return to work in order to get more money. In the United States, many people get their health insurance as part of their employment package. Their employer pays for their health insurance, which is otherwise very expensive to buy and unaffordable for many people. So one of the reasons to continue to work is that you retain your health insurance when you're in a mainstream community job. Pressure from others, employer, family, about continuing to work is another factor. And many people are worried about having nothing to do in retirement. And so, and as I'll talk in a minute, some of the intervention studies that we've done have looked at helping people to have socially inclusive, active, meaningful retirement activities. Especially for people who retire involuntarily, there are what we call push factors, things that push people into retirement. Health problems are one of those factors. So one of the workers who worked as a janitor doing cleaning in a building that involved cleaning the floors using a machine called a shampooer. His doctor said he wasn't well enough to use that anymore. And that was one of the factors that led to his retirement. As people age, as I'll discuss in a minute, they sometimes have mobility problems. So one woman ended up retired because she had a hip replacement and a difficult recovery from that. Problems with the nature of the work. One man, because of short staffing in his workplace, had to do more work, and he found that very tiring and stressful. Of course, employment means having to meet the employer's standards for productivity, and some aging employees find that increasingly difficult as they slow down in their workplace performance, and that can lead to them thinking that they want to retire or others telling them that they need to retire. And in one instance, and this was the man who retired quite young, his job was outsourced to contractors, and so his job disappeared and these other people took over his job, and he decided to take early retirement. But there are also more positive factors that they call pull factors, things that encourage you or pull you into retirement because retirement is attractive. Having your finances and other things in order is one of those things that you can afford to retire. So you become eligible in the United States for government health insurance. One very important thing that's come up quite a few times is people reaching a work milestone. They've had 10, 20, 30 years in their job, and they feel that they've achieved enough that they deserve retirement. And looking forward to the fact that you've got the freedom to do what you want in retirement, whereas at work, you have to do what the boss tells you. So they are all things that make retirement attractive or pull you into retirement. I mentioned mobility issues as one important factor that's related to employment and retirement. And this chart, also from the National Core Indicators Survey in the same year, shows that over time, looking at this top continuous black line, the percentage of people who are mobile without aids decreases quite dramatically. From 87% in younger age groups to 61% in the 65-year age group. And likewise, people who need mobility aids increase. Those who are not independently mobile at all stays about the same. But these issues of mobility play into the difficulty of work and the difficulty of traveling to work. And we found when we looked at that in paid community employment, this was especially important, that those who are independently mobile were 3.85 times as likely to have a community job as those who weren't independently mobile. And that difference applied in every age group across that full range of adulthood to retirement age. And so mobility limitations may be a barrier to getting or keeping a community job, and that if you acquire a mobility impairment as you age, that might lead to premature retirement because of problems in getting to work, because most people in community jobs travel independently to work using public transport, or might make your work tasks more difficult, or both. So it can be a factor in leading to retirement. Retirement is a complex set of issues with lots of factors involved, and people approach it in many different ways. Some people retire all at once, like they're working full-time on Friday, and on Monday they're fully retired. Others retire gradually by reducing their hours or work days. Some don't retire completely, but keep working part-time and do retirement activities. Some people have retired but return to some degree of work, or they unretire, as the words goes. And retirement can be voluntary, people can choose to do it, or involuntary, it's forced upon them by job loss or health problems or other issues, and can be planned or unplanned. And the mainstream retirement research for the general community shows clearly that people do better if they plan for and prepare for retirement. The picture you see there is from an intervention study we did in Australia of a group of older people who volunteer at a community plant nursery. One of those people is a man with intellectual disability who cut down his time at a sheltered employment to develop this part of his retirement lifestyle. And I think it's a beautiful picture that shows how included that person is, because I defy you to tell me which person has the intellectual disability and which person doesn't, because it didn't matter in that environment. Everybody was volunteering together. I'm going to share with you, and if time permits, 2 stories from our chapter in the Dignity of Work book that Renata posted the link to in the chat a little while ago. One is about a woman whose pseudonym is Helen, and she unretired. She was in her early 60s, and she worked at a large store on 4 days a week, and her work was physically difficult. And just as importantly, most of her co-workers were much younger, and she didn't really have any shared interests with those people. So she didn't get much out of interacting and socializing with her co-workers because they didn't have interests in common. She wanted to retire, but her family, in particular her sister, were worried that she'd be bored in retirement and her mental health would get worse. So she was supported while still working to volunteer at a local school in the school library. She found that work interesting and enjoyable, but there was also a focus on ensuring that she had positive, fun social interaction with other workers in that volunteering environment. So office staff who were much closer in age to her and who had shared interests with her, and she travelled to that volunteering opportunity by bus. Then she was taught to do that. And she then picked up another volunteering activity, and she also enjoyed that and was still not enjoying her paid work. So that confirmed to her decision that she wanted to retire from that job that she didn't like in the store. So she had a retirement celebration at work and retired, but made it clear that she still wanted to work if a different type of job could be found. It took some months before a suitable job was found, but the experiences that she had with her volunteering helped her to know what type of job she wanted and what type of social interactions and work that she wanted in a new workplace. And she eventually unretired and began work part-time as an office assistant with people who she did have shared interests with. And that's an example of one of the intervention studies that we've done in Australia, supporting people to develop a socially inclusive retirement lifestyle. And Renata, give me a heads up if I'm running out of time, please. I'll continue on because people are worried about retirement and they fear that they'll be socially isolated and bored in retirement, have nothing to do. So they're looking for meaningful activities and social connections. But Michelle Brotherton's research here in Australia shows very clearly that people who retire without a plan, this just doesn't happen by magic, and they need planning and support, as was provided through the intervention study, as shown in Helen's story, in order for those opportunities to occur and for them to provide the kinds of meaningful activity and social interaction that they're looking for. The approach that we've taken in Australia is to help people plan for and begin this retirement journey while they're still working, so that they can continue those activities in retirement, but that they still have the meaning and the social involvement that work provides, but they may reduce their amount of work over time and take on more of these retirement activities according to their own schedule and their own preferences. So this is a gradual, planned and supported move towards retirement. Brian's story is an example of somebody who continued to do some work, but also engaged in volunteering for the reasons I just explained. Brian was a man in his late 50s who worked in a large store 3 days one week and 4 days the next week. And he actually found that changing schedule quite confusing. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute, but he really liked to do a regular schedule of productive, meaningful activities. He liked to do things that resulted in a benefit for himself and others. And he wanted to keep working, but he was also preparing for his eventual retirement. And he was particularly interested in volunteering in an aged care home because he thought he might actually live in one of those settings later in life. And he also had a former friend and neighbour who lived in that setting. And using his skills and strengths, he volunteered with support and with support and training, learned to do the activities there independently, and also learned to travel to and from the home from where he lived via public transportation. At his request, his paid work was simplified to have the same 3-day work week every week, which he found easier. And on the 4th day, when he didn't work, he did his volunteering at the aged care home, and he assisted with social activities at the home and joined in them as well, and got the social stimulation and enjoyment out of them, as well as supporting others to do that. And this was really effective for him long term. So he continued that for 4 years until sadly COVID intervened, and there were very strict restrictions in Australia that prevented people visiting aged care homes. Only staff could go there. Even family members weren't able to go in the height of the pandemic. So after 4 years, his volunteering had to stop because of the pandemic. But I think the 4-year duration shows how effective and beneficial this intervention was. I'm going to finish by just drawing your attention to some resources that describe these approaches to supporting people to gradually transition to retirement. This is a resource that is available as a print book, but I recommend you look for the ebook because you can get it immediately from Google Play or the iBookstore, and it has videos embedded as well as all of the text, and it explains how to implement these interventions. And a second resource is a more recent piece of work that we did in Minnesota at the Institute of Community Integration in the US, and can be found. It's a free resource that can be found at this link. And it updated the book and ebook that I just showed you for the US context, and focused, the book was about people transitioning from sheltered employment. This focused more directly on mainstream employment, and updated it with more recent research, changes in technology for transportation and at work and so forth, and identified videos that were more relevant to the US context and to mainstream employment. There are some references at the end of this, for those of you who are interested in following up on any of the information, and those are my contact details, I'd be happy for you to contact me if you're interested in retirement from mainstream employment. And thank you. I hope I haven't run too badly over time.
Thank you, Roger. Yeah, I think your presentation was the only one specifically addressing retirement. So we have time for 1 or 2 questions or comments for Roger.
Renata, this is Nick. There is a comment in chat.
Okay.
Interesting in that our colleagues at the University of Kansas reported that for people with mobility limitations, every step that they must use in order to exit their home or enter a building within the community decreases the likelihood of leaving the home or entering a community building by approximately 7%.
Yeah, in my experience personally and with research, mobility is a very big issue. And there are a number of ways of looking at it. And certainly, environmental barriers are incredibly important, as are work accommodations and adaptations to enable people to continue to do their job. One of the areas that I don't think we've paid enough attention to is prevention of mobility impairments. There's a lot of information out there about how to reduce the incidence of mobility impairments and falls, and we haven't applied that, or haven't given people with intellectual and developmental disabilities enough access to that. So I'd really emphasize that. And likewise, the workplace accommodations, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to enable people who have become less mobile to get to work safely and to do their work safely. And some of those things are quite straightforward. One example here in Australia was a woman who travelled to work by train, and it was a matter of her going to a different railway station that had an elevator to enable her to get to the platform. And likewise, there was an elevator at her destination station. So just helping her to change her routine to enable her to travel safely was one example. Another interesting example was a woman who retired, lost weight, and started attending physical exercise classes, and her mobility improved, and she actually went back to work and was able to work quite successfully with improved mobility.
All right. Anything else for Roger? Okay, thank you.